All right, all right, all right, all right.
Hey,
Hello,
everybody.
hello.
We are live.
We are live. It is a new year.
Woo! Happy New Year.
Martin Luther King
2021.
Jr. Day. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 2021.
We are here. Okay, I was just making sure I could see us on our page. Want to make sure we were in. Welcome everybody to the enduring legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are excited and honored actually to be here tonight to have a much needed conversation around the legacy of Dr. King, what work is being done now to carry on his legacy, what the representation of his legacy means and has meant for us as a community and our understanding of leadership, what and how important it is for the movement to carry, to make sure, hold on one second, they said our signal.
How's the signal?
Okay, they said it's choppy. This might be our, let me take this off.
All right, you come off of Wi-Fi.
Come off Wi-Fi. Here, hold on, we don't get, is that better, everybody?
You see it's the signal. How's it?
So we're gonna grab another computer to let's see. Well, it says we got bars. But we're here tonight to, while we figure this out and make sure that this works out, to talk about and let's log in from another computer. We're gonna log in from another computer, everybody, and be right back. Okay, so Bay said to stay here, and we're gonna come in through another line. Give us a second, everybody. We're gonna get this right. Well, it was fine before we were broadcasting. That's how this works. Give us a second, everybody. We have this conversation. Of course, we listen. The signal is fine. Hashtag no blacks ones. No steady riding. Okay, we are going to come into another.
All right.
All right, is this better? So let us know. Okay. All right, everybody.
Hopefully we all good.
Hopefully we're better. Let us know. It looks like we're better from our end. Let us know, somebody from somewhere.
If we all good.
Okay.
Perfect. See?
Okay. Let's get into it.
All right.
So we are here and excited to introduce our illustrious, extraordinary panel of activists, of educators, of warriors in all their respective fields.
Yeah.
Let's get them here. Go ahead, start.
First up, we are going to start off with our dear brother. He is the CIO of Black with No Chaser.
Yes.
Cirillo Manego.
The third. Cirillo.
Welcome, welcome.
What's good, man? How y'all doing, man? Good to have you. Good to be on stage, man. I'm glad we got it. Figured out, because I was worried. I was like, oh Lord, the internet's hating.
Oh yeah.
I gotta get one of them shirts too, though, man. Openly Black, man. I gotta get one of those. Y'all know I'm a fan, so.
Blairisms.com, y'all check it out. All right, next up, we are excited to welcome our dear sister, Courtney Snowden, y'all. She is a Peloton enthusiast, but also former deputy mayor of DC.
Yes.
She is, just an all-around black excellence, y'all. Next up,
I gotta bring in.
Go ahead.
You gotta let me bring in my 504 sister, the co-executive director of the House of Tulip. I mean, and my girl for life, the extraordinary Mariah Moore. Get me Mariah Moore.
Hurry up. She's only got 15
She's
minutes.
only got 15 minutes.
All right. Next up, let me bring in my UMBC brother, Dr. Marcus Board. He is a professor at Georgetown University and just all-around genius.
Yes.
Next up,
I'm going to bring in my brother. We got to work together in the trenches. He is continuing that work, steering that ship, flying the plane now. The CEO of Peer Forward, my dear brother, Gary Lennon.
Ow. And last
but certainly
not least, y'all.
Certainly not least. The
editor at large
of Philadelphia Magazine
and
the CEO of Ernest Media Empire
and
the
president of the Philadelphia NABJ, y'all. Ernest Owens,
Ernest Owens, everybody. Listen.
See, you know, y'all, when we talk about excellence, this is what we're talking about.
So we are excited to have you all here. Thank you all for joining us tonight, for spending your time on such an extraordinarily important day in such an extraordinarily important time in history. I mean, like, what a time to be alive.
Yes.
What a time to be alive. So, you know, we were supposed to be off from doing live shows, and I could not resist the opportunity to sit with these extraordinary minds. And Bay had to stop me, and I want to say this publicly. Bay had to stop me because he was like, Bay, we can't end up with 15 people on the phone.
Right. Who's got time to be sitting here for 3 hours in that? Like, you know what's gonna happen when the world opens up?
Oh, we're gonna do this all in person.
Do this all in person, and we will fellowship, and we will share all of this brilliance in person. I'm sure of it. But first of all, up, what we're gonna do is get into this discussion, and we're gonna let everybody tell you a little bit about what they're doing to carry on Dr. King's legacy. So first up, let's hear from Courtney. You are first. I know, yes. You are first up.
The ladies first.
Ladies first, yes. Please tell us, what is the work that you are doing in the community to carry on the enduring legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, first, it is such an honor to be here with you two and everyone else on this distinguished panel. Having the opportunity on my baby's birthday, he's turning 4 today, to celebrate the legacy and life of Dr. King is just so meaningful and powerful. So, as y'all know, my entire career, I have been an advocate. I do that now through my own firm called the Blueprint Strategy Group. And I also do it through advocating for the health and wellness in particular of Black women through Peloton, through Black Girl Magic, the Peloton edition, which is a group of more than 15,000 African-American women who use Peloton at the center of their fitness and wellness journey. And it was a really important opportunity to create community for us to really talk about how we take care of ourselves as we save the world. Because if this year didn't teach you Black women save the world, if 2020 didn't show you Black women save the world, you ain't never gonna know it. The fact that we do and did save the democracy, and we have to take time to take care of ourselves too. The other thing I'll just say, and you mentioned this when you introduced me, I was the deputy mayor of my hometown, Washington, D.C. And really my job as deputy mayor for greater economic opportunity was focused on building access to economic opportunity, really living, helping our city live the principles that Dr. King espoused with respect to economic justice. So my job was really to prevent gentrification. And so I've dedicated my career both to advocating in the halls of Congress and fighting for our people there, and really figuring out how we take lots of resources to really change the lives of those among us who have the least. And I think all of that together is consistent with Dr. King's vision for the future of America, and most importantly, the future of Black people.
Yes, Courtney. Yes, thank you so much, not only for the work that you are doing now, but the work that you've done to carry on Dr. King's legacy. Mariah, please.
Oh, so just want to say thank you all for having me and asking me to be a part of this. You know, I give so much of myself back to my community. Right. As Blair and Brandon mentioned, I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of House of Tulip, which provides long-term housing solutions for transgender non-conforming community in Louisiana, specifically New Orleans. I'm also a national organizer at the Transgender Law Center, which is based out of Oakland, California, where I run an ACRE program called Black Trans Circles, which convenes and builds the political power and resilience of Black trans women and femmes, specifically in the South. We know that over this last year, we've seen an ever so growing number of murders of Black trans women and femmes, as well as trans masculine folks. I think that one of the most powerful things you could do is take capital from people who have an excess of it and give it to people who have none. And so that's what House of Tulip does, is we gain capital and then we give it back to our people, and we build an inheritance so that they can build generational wealth, and so that they can remain safe and stable and, you know, build lives for themselves. Because one thing we want to do is we want to end homelessness, but we also want to end violence in our community. And one way we can do that is providing resources. And I think that, you know, that's why I wake up every day and do the work that I do, because I've experienced that violence, and I don't want other and future generations to experience the violence and just the outright lack of resources that we've experienced historically as Black people, but even, you know, even more so as LGBTQ folks.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for the work that you were doing and for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, my love. Let's take the brothers in alphabetical order.
All right. I was going to say we can just go ahead and stay in the 504. And that technically he's in DC, I think, but
both things work. He's next either way. Our brother Cirillo Monego.
Man, appreciate you, Blair and Brandon. Thank y'all always, man, for having me and sharing y'all platform, man. Look, I know we've been at this a few times now. You've been on my platform, I'm on y'all platform again, and I don't think what better way right now to celebrate it with all of you. So thank y'all for having me, and I appreciate you for being on this panel. But yeah, so I'm the CIO of Black with No Chaser. We've been around since 2017. And in terms of like continue the legacy and what we think about as we think about Martin Luther King, is really like building community, right? And unifying Black people all across the world. Right now, we have organically, we're touching 500,000 people strong across the world. Right now, our biggest audience is now in France for some reason. I don't know what happened with that. But it just goes to show you that thinking Black and living Black is not only locale, but it's really a state of mind and being and connecting hearts and minds to the work, so our hands and feet get moved in the right direction. And I really believe that that's what MLK really embodied. Not just MLK, but all the organizers that have been doing this work for a very, 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 very long time. And we all know that if you're on this side of things, it's a very thankless job, what we do. But every day, you know, we 10 toes down to get this work done. But not just for me, but for future generations. So that's really, in a nutshell, Black with No Chasing what we're doing.
And I want to, because I don't want us to get into the discussion and not recognize what you did recently in terms of speaking truth to power, in terms of putting yourself kind of standing in the gap. You went viral recently. You went down to Loser's Lane on January 6th.
In the midst of the
madness.
It's still rolling.
Oh yeah, no. Loser's Lane has been rolling in America since the 1400s.
Right.
And so, you know, Loser's Lane, it didn't just become Loser's Lane. But I just wanted for you to speak just a second on that experience before we move to Ernest, because I don't want us to get into the discussion and miss that.
Yeah, first of all, like, I mean, it was kind of like an out of body experience when you think about it. Anytime you go viral for something that you do on a daily, it just seems surreal, because like there are many people that could have gone viral for many different like courageous acts of like really Black excellence out there. But it just so happens that I happen to be maybe the right person, right time. I don't know, right? It's hard to kind of like, you know, put that together. in a real way. But what I will say though is that I've been humbled by the amount of people around the world, man. I'm telling you, I've been on like interview after interview, and it's really been like thinking about the people in the UK and Ghana and Ethiopia and parts of Australia, and like literally people that aren't even black around the world, in Canada and over in Mexico. And there's so much synergy around this moment. And for me to be at this middle of it on January 6th in 2021 was I don't know. I'm still kind of like trying to collect it and figure out what it means in the grand scheme of things. What I hope it does mean is that somebody was empowered and inspired and motivated to kind of pick up the mantle and like hold it with us with people that have been doing this work for so long. And so that's what I hope in that moment. And that's not about me, but more about the collective.
Yeah, well, brother, we are glad that you made it through that event safely and are here to share your brilliance with us. Next up, Ernest, please.
Hi. So yes, my name is Ernest Owens. I'm an award-winning journalist and CEO of Ernest Media Empire LLC. For me, my work speaks for itself. As a journalist, it's really about speaking truth to power and really putting a, mirror in front of what we see. Pretty much all I'm doing is giving people a chance to see themselves and see what it looks like. And sometimes that reflection that they see in the mirror doesn't really necessarily make them feel too good. And sometimes it is optimistic and promising. And I think that Dr. King does that. I think that's what his legacy has done, is that he showed America its face. He showed America what it was like. And some of the best journalism we saw during that era was when we saw those photographs of our ancestors and our family members getting bitten by dogs and getting water hosed, right? When the national world got to see that on national TV of our country that was supposed to be this democracy in this open space, it was Dr. King's words, the movement work of so many of the folks alongside of him, like Bayard Rustin and other Black women like Rosa Parks and others that did that work, Fannie Lou Hamer, all these people who did this work to get us there. I just look at myself as a journalist as someone's archiving that history in the present moment and just keeping the story alive, because years from now, someone's going to make another Selma, but it won't be Selma. It will be Charlotte, be every other corner, every other block that has happened. And I think about that is, we're in living history, and the work that we do and the work that you all are doing, right, in many ways is archiving that. So I think that's really important.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you so much. Let's go now alphabetically, elemental P, to Gary Lennon.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this space, and it's great just to be around some smart, beautiful individuals in the collective that are fighting the good fight, if you will, and fighting the good trouble. As Blair had me a part of this, we had the opportunity to go ahead and work together years ago because we both believed in the same thing about how do we make sure that we go ahead and support individuals from underrepresented communities to be able to realize their voice and understand that they can actually be about change. How do you make sure that you can actually stand up for what you actually believe in? If we're talking about exactly what Martin Luther King has gone through, it's about making sure that we're looking at everybody was created equal, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, anything about you. There's nothing that we were born equal. And I want to make sure that all the communities that we serve right now about 88,000 students across the country, high schools primarily, to make sure that they understand that you can actually change things, if you will. And our primary focus is around making sure that if you want to, as Courtney was talking about the economic disparities, a college degree, you're much more inclined to make sure that you can actually break the poverty cycle if you can actually get a 4-year degree. Some of that can be debatable with some individuals right now, but what we all recognize is that individuals from low income communities, you need to make sure that you have some type of trajectory or some type of plan. And so what we make sure to do is that in all our communities, whether it's from New York, LA, Florida, even in the Western Hills of West Virginia, that you understand the power of having a degree. So that's what we primarily focus on. I've been with the organization for 14 years. I'm really excited about being the first leader of color of the organization, the first non-founder. As the individual that comes from the projects of New York City, I definitely understand what it means to be, grown up on a food stamp. And I'm talking about before the actual EBT card. I'm talking about like a food stamp booklet for us that are much, much older, to understand what it actually means to, have some type of sustainability economically. And I want to make sure that our young folks get that. It's the same young folks right now that are actually going in the streets and actually calling out all the economic and social injustices that Martin Luther King have actually called out 50 or 60 years ago. And what we do as an organization is we provide them structure. Say, if you're going to do it, this is the way that you can do it, and make sure that people actually hear you. And so I'm excited to be a part of that movement. Again, I wake up every single day, looking at our young folks of like, you're better than this. And society and the stats will tell you that you're not supposed to be able to make it. But if I can make it, I know you can too. And so again, excited to be a part of this call and talk about, what do we need to do to call individuals to action and make things happen.
Yes. Thank you so much, Gary, for the work that you are doing. Woo! We have both poured into College Summit. Blair certainly much forward. At Peer Forward. Blair certainly a lot over the years. And lastly, let's hear from our brother, Dr. Marcus Board.
Professor.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me. I am honored to be on a panel with such amazing people. So currently I'm a professor of African American Studies at Georgetown, trained in political science. And like everybody else here, the way that my work connects to Dr. King is through building community. It's something that a lot of people talk about, but as we hear on this panel, some of us are actually doing. One of the things that my work tries to touch on the most is teaching people that community is a verb, right? It's something that we build, it's something that we do together, it's a practice that we do. And in the society that we live in, very many people get convinced that their accolades or their degrees or their clout is somehow more important than actually connecting with one another. And so in a world where we are, because of this disastrous system of capitalism, where we're constantly shipped from school to work to school to work, a lot of times we forget that connecting with actual people is one of the resounding legacies that Dr. King provided for us. So I think we're seeing a lot of that now. During COVID, people are building these mutual aid networks. And I think my role and one of the things that I'm participating at this stage in is trying to help develop that radical consciousness in our youth. It's something that I've been doing locally for a very long time. And I look forward to keep doing.
Yes. Well, that's a perfect segue into our first kind of area of discussion. Thank you again to all of you.
Blaxcellence, y'all.
Blaxcellence. Y'all see why when we had this idea and got these folks together, we could not pass up the opportunity to have this conversation with these extraordinary folks. And so thank you again all for being here. Marcus, I want to stay with you actually and have you open the first topic of conversation around the representation of something that you spoke for.
Really more the misrepresentation.
The representation
Dr.
slash
King.
The representation and whether that has been accurate or not, right? I want to talk about it as the representation, and we can talk about its accuracy or not, because that's what has been such, I think this year more than any that I've seen in recent history, the conversation around the accuracy of the representation and the impact that has had not only on those who call themselves allies to the community
and activists and leaders in the community,
but activists and leaders to the community and leadership and the definition of leadership in the community. So can you let's start with you on the topic of the representation and the accuracy or not in that impact of Dr. King's legacy.
Sure. So why don't we just start off with the hard point. The hard point is that people like Barack Obama are not a representation of the legacy of Dr. King, right? So when we start off, we need to just start off, let's just be real clear.
Okay. Well, let's just start there.
What Dr. King represents, and this is something that was talked about in his era. We just recently spoke about this when I was talking about reading the biography of James Foreman, SNCC's longtime secretary, is that even during King's era, he talked about people being worried when you put this one shining light figure at the top of the line above everybody else. And you know, Foreman talked about this, Robert Williams talked about this, Ella Baker talked about this. Everybody in their time talked about this, to Ernest's point about documenting and making clear what the story is today. And somehow the powers that be, because they are so strong, manipulated that agenda. They turned King into a capitalist, right? They didn't turn him into a radical, damn near communist who was standing side by side with people trying to get them a 10-cent minimum wage, excuse me. And so I think when we think about this misrepresentation, a big part of it is that Dr. King is put up as this educated pacifist, essentially. And while he was nonviolent, something as small as knowing that this man owned guns changes some things. One of the things I really try to push back against is people believing that the most important aspect of our growth is education. And that is obviously not to say, to Gary's point, that education is not important, because it is vital. It changed my life. It changed probably all of our lives here. But what I'm saying is that we know a lot of real smart people, a lot of intellectuals who are dangerous, who are violent, who have and continue to destroy this country. And so when we talk about intellectualism, education, studying, wanting to know and do better, one of the legacies that Dr. King provides us is that growth. Dr. King was a local boy, right? He was in Atlanta. He was in Selma. He was doing that work at home, but he also had this desire to grow and to learn and to develop. And so while the myth is important, while symbolic representation is important, we also need to remember, again, community is a practice, right? Empathy is action, and we need to be out and connected with one another in order to grow that spirit.
Yes. I was gonna say, Ernest, I'd love to hear your take, especially as we're talking about documenting the accuracy of someone's legacy. I mean, we've got a lot of people walking around right now who are making some historical action, like taking historical actions. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote a piece today for the Daily Beast that was, you know, brilliantly titled "Republicans Keep Dr. King's Name Out of Your Mouths." And a lot of this was about exactly what was just said, that there has been this molding. But what I really think that's really important to note is that I really feel like MLK's legacy has become almost like Santa Claus, where people will recreate their own version of this individual to fit their own personal beliefs and ideas. So some people say Santa is lactose intolerant, so we're going to give him, you know, soy milk versus dairy milk, right? And then some people are like, well, Santa really likes chocolate chip cookies, so we're going to give him that. So everybody's remixed what they want MLK to be for their own personal interest, because they know that he is someone who's respected within the Black community, as far as they know that this man is an icon. But what comes of that nature is people then using and weaponizing people with it. So, you know, because white people specifically and people in positions of power know that Black folks hold MLK in such high regard, because before Obama was president, the picture that was hanging up in your grandma's house was MLK and JFK. And so, and Jesus, right? So you had these three people that were mostly framed in the house. And then Obama, of course, came right after. But they knew that to tap into people quoting him, misquoting him, or using his quote as a way to appeal to their audience was the way that they can do what they want. And so I really did a good job, if I do say so myself, just matching a lot of the things that MLK really spoke about and putting it in context. So people will pull out a quote, but then they didn't fill in the rest of the question, right? So one of the things was that, for example, the notional riots. They said Dr. King, you know, said he does not support, these types of riots, right? He said that they were socially destructive and self-defeating. But then he turned around and said, it is not enough for me to stand before you tonight and condemn riots without at the same time condemning the contingent, intolerable conditions that exist in our society. And then he later finalized that by saying that a riot is the language of the unheard. So that's what people have done, is that they don't understand that he is actually very nuanced, he is very complex, and he's very thorough in his inspection of nonviolence, which makes sense for us as Black people wrestling what that looks like. He too was a part of that. Issue is that white people cut him off from that and use him and weaponize him in ways to try to censor and silence Black protesters, which I believe that according to his work, he would have supported and understood and empathized with.
That's a word.
Yeah, Courtney, I gotta hear what you gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, as I think about sort of what Dr. King said towards the end of his life and how it differed, we have to remember, and I think people forget this, Dr. King was a very young man when he started in this fight. I mean, I cannot imagine the burden that he carried in his very early, late, and mid-20s as he did this work to become a social justice warrior, right? And I think, like him, all of us even who do this work, who have a different view of the work when we start, when we are fully idealistic and believe in the power of change without nuance, to Ernest's point, without sort of understanding the cultural and economic context in which these problems exist and have existed in our country. And I think towards the end of his life, he started to understand and say in a very provocative way, look, this fight for real is about economic justice and making sure that we have economic access and the ability to care for our families and our communities. That when we think about what it means to create a just society, it must also include making sure that we change how the pie is split up and that resources are available to all people. When I speak about the work I do professionally, I always say I speak truth to power. I bring power to truth, but I build power for everybody and not just a small group of people. And for me, that is what Dr. King lived by and espoused. And so when you travel through urban areas that have blight and overwhelming access of wealth, that is the world that Dr. King wanted to combat. That is the world he wanted to eradicate. And the fact is, what we know continues to be true is that you cannot have real justice without economic justice. It just does not exist. And until we solve that problem, we won't be living his legacy out. I will say, I do think Barack Obama is one personification of Dr. King's dream. I think everybody in this discussion is a personification of Dr. King's dream. And the unfortunate reality is, even with all of us existing in a world and making changes we do separately, we have not been able to move the needle substantially on the bigger issues that Dr. King wrestled with and fought for.
That's child.
I want to, before we go to the next person, I do want to ask if Marcus wants to respond to that. Because I think the discussion is pointless if we don't have a discussion about it.
Let's talk.
I do, and I think that because Barack Obama is such a, he's such a figure.
Polarizing figure.
He's such a figure in the Black community. I mean, his name will be written in history many times or more than Dr. King's name at this point. And so, for Marcus,
so will they tell the truth?
Well, here's where we are, and this is why we have to talk about this. And it's going to talk. And I want us to dig into, double click here, only because we're also going to talk about accountability within the movement. We talk through this, and because Marcus opened with that, I think we should stay here for a second. So Marcus, I'd love for you to respond.
Yeah, I agree with everything Courtney said, just for the record. On Obama, I think one of the important things that we need to remember about Dr. King and how we are introducing this conversation is about how he's misrepresented. So I want him to be measured by the measure that he doled out, right? So when we compare someone to Dr. King, for me, I take them to the standard that he set on capitalism, on racism, and on militarism. And so by those standards, the neoliberal president can't measure up to that domestically in terms of capitalism. And in terms of foreign policy, it's well documented the propensity to drone strikes that our former president used. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that our former President Obama is, the son of the devil, right? That's not the point. The point is that in that office, he had some opportunity to carry the legacy in a way that, as we said here, speaks truth to power. And what we see while he was in office and since he's left is a devastating impact on grassroots communities and organizers, particularly those who are protesting in a way that he does not think is acceptable. And so while I might guess that Dr. King, his day-to-day, respectability politics maybe weren't the best. And while I wouldn't necessarily want to hold Obama to a standard of his, of a man of his age, really, who sees young Black folk dressing and talking and carrying on in a certain way, and has something to say about it. That being said, when we're comparing to the legacy of Dr. King, who was not by any means perfect, he at least understood that in the position that he held, he needed to be very responsible about how he used his words and his language about people who had different needs. That's all I would say about that.
Oh, that's real.
I think that's a powerful point to make. I'm curious to ask Courtney before we go to another panelist what her thoughts are around that kind of double click from Marcus on Obama.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I don't think I'm saying that I'm not comparing the legacies of Dr. King and President Obama, right? We still have he's still alive. We still have an opportunity to see what his comprehensive and full legacy will be. Right. But what I will say is, having been in the position of being both an activist, an advocate, and then having to go in-house in government and try to solve the problems, it is a difficult line to walk. And identifying the balance to do the things that you commit to do that speak to your soul and are aligned with your values, and having to manage the compromises of various constituencies, all of whom you represent, is a difficult line to walk. And it is easy from the outside to criticize and to express concern. And it is the job of the activist and the advocate to do that. But it is the job of the lawmaker and the elected official to figure out how to get something done. And I think we can talk about Barack Obama's 8 years as president. 8 years, have inspired me, that have inspired my son. I mean, look, my son was born January 18th, 2017. He was born on January 18th, 2017, because I did not want to have a baby when Donald Trump was president. I wanted both of my children to be in this world and be born while Barack Obama was president, and both of my children were. And I think this is more than just about symbolism, but symbolism is important too. The fact that a Black man has reached the highest office in the land is meaningful, and we have to take a minute to applaud that. And then at the same time, and I think to Marcus's point, we can absolutely criticize the things that he did that we don't agree with, and we should hold his legacy accountable to the reality of what he did. But to suggest that he didn't do anything for our people, that he didn't do anything to help expand economic opportunity for Black people and Black community, that's just not true. And if we're going to tell the story, we got to tell the whole story.
Facts were made. I think for me,
one of the things I want to say something, and I'm going to let Ernest jump in. I just want to say one of the things that I found interesting about the response, and it is this dance. We live in a society that was created, right, and built to sustain oppression.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So when you go into public service within a corrupt system, you said compromise, right? This is why some of us choose. This is why some folks who have the chops for politics decide not to, because there are certain parts of it that come with compromise, because like you said, there are constituencies who are still living in the 1800s.
Right.
Yeah.
And you still have to, you end up having to make compromise with constituencies who have power, but who are living in a system that is maintaining power and oppressing people at the same time. Ernest and Cirillo, please, and then Mariah.
I just want to say that I think what happens in these conversations when we talk about Obama, MLK, we got to recognize that they're serving different purposes. And I think that that's what I need people to understand is this, like, MLK committed his life to doing service in a very activist way and in a way that was meant that he was accountable to the people. And he was accountable to the people in a very different way than what an elected official is.
Yes.
And I think how I feel about a lot of these conversations, and I think it's not our fault as a community, because we hold these people and we make these people a lot of things for us, and they are doing a lot of things that they're not supposed to be doing, essentially. And so one thing with Obama is that, you know, he did certain things policy-wise, but he was never going to be, in my mind, what MLK was, because of the fact that MLK ran unchained in a different type of work. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but my preference, because of who I am and the work I do as a free speech advocate, I prefer my Black men to be free and liberated in a sense to do the work. But I understand that there's also different seats and people hold different roles.
Right.
I am very anti-police. I don't support it. I'm abolish the police all day, every day. But I know that there are people that, for whatever reason, say we need to have Black police, whatever. I think that's
Ernest, Black police.
Black police are not.
They want it, right? And so there are people who believe, and there are older generation from me, that there has to be this representation in these different places. They still want Black people getting Academy Awards, even though the Oscars do not want us and we don't need them. We have our own. But for whatever reason, people want that. And listen, they can have that, but I want us to be sure not to conflate. And what I hate is when there's the conflation. I hate that people are putting two and two together. And see, that's why I say, no, you can have that person doing that for you, but don't put them in the same conversation with a lot of the radical folk that's done this work. I don't appreciate the Shirley Chisholm comparisons with Kamala Harris. They're not the same. And I really think that people need to stop doing that, where they want to compare them, because if you really look at Shirley Chisholm's politics, her actual politics, and her background, they are not the same in that regard. Let's be very clear. Historical markers do not define historical intent. Yes, MLK has a Nobel Peace Prize, and so does Barack Obama. But Obama's intentions and what he did with his office were very different from the intentions that MLK wanted to do with his office. And I think that we get caught up in the accolades because we're all in this same place called America, where everybody's getting these things, and we don't understand what the intentions are. So I think I'm okay with people coexisting with their faiths. You can like Obama, and I like parts of Obama. But at the same time, let's not keep comparing these people because they're in different categories. It's like going to a ballroom and everybody's saying this person is serving realness. No, that's not the realness category. You're in the category, but you're not serving realness.
No.
People that put people in the wrong category, and that's how we have the problems that we're doing. So love all of these performers, love all of these politicians, love all these activists, but stop putting them in the wrong category. Obama is not in the same category with MLK, period.
Okay,
we gotta get
Cirillo. I feel like we should keep on going, man. Y'all summed it up. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but what I will say is about our older Black leaders, while I appreciate all the trailblazing and mopping the floors for us and paving the way for folk like me and folks on this panel, I will say that they got too adjusted to injustice, right? This idea of what is bold versus what is not bold. You know, this word gets thrown around a lot in politics, and we allow it to happen, right? We allow these agendas and these like weird euphemisms to keep popping up left and right and can kind of control our mind. I think it was part of the reason why we started Black with No Chaser. I like to call it, in some ways, like we started this whole like journalism mixtape series where we would find articles that would misrepresent, right, and or underrepresent or tell stories that we know are patently false and try to shift the narrative. We would go back on top of your article and rewrite, right, what exactly was supposed to be said, because in order to be bold, you have to be willing to lose some political capital, right? If you're not willing to lose anything and give anything away, and I think that, look, hopefully with this new wave of Congress coming in, people like Cori Bush and the AOCs of the world that can really push a real progressive agenda. But I think one thing we cannot let happen is this idea of really this dichotomy of credentials versus vision, credentials versus who has the real plan and can set things in motion. I think a lot of times in a liberal way, neoliberal way, we like have this, like we have to say we're fantasizing people who have this like way of like breathing life or injecting hope and change, but never when you look on the other side of it, when it's all said and done, you look around and be like, where's the change? I can't physically see it. That being said, though, what I would leave with is this: is Barack Obama was like a real like institutional constructionalist. What I mean by that is he was more understanding of the Constitution and how he can use the Constitution to then make moves. I think that if you're not familiar with that piece of the politics and the way our legislative system works and the executive branch and the entire relationship of the judicial branch, I think it becomes very, very, very difficult to understand Barack Obama's place in history. To me, I take him for what it is. I agree with the majority of everything was said. And so I don't look at Barack Obama as the savior for Black people, the savior for Black agenda. But what I do see is that when you see things like this, a federal judge and says that's unconstitutional what the Trump administration is doing, and then Barack Obama put those people in place, right, by way of appointment, that is structural change. And so we can't sit here and say that Barack Obama didn't do anything, but we can say that in some regard he didn't do what we wanted him to do. But we got to actually jive with the fact that things what we wanted versus what could be done and mix in versus the man who we're actually examining based on the reality and the truth that we know to be. And so that with being said, I'll stop there.
I do want to nuance this just a little bit because often these conversations get into discussions that aren't being had around extreme I don't think it is being offered by anybody that Barack Obama didn't do anything for Black people. I don't think that is necessarily being offered that he didn't try to do some things for Black people. I think
getting married.
Right, same here. I think what was being offered is that there are things that he did that were destructive to Black people, and that is not a conversation that is had often when we talk about his legacy.
Right. I think that more speaks to the conversation around accountability, and it's especially I'd love to hear Mariah your especially as we talk about Barack Obama, as you just mentioned, he was over legalization of gay marriage, but the conversation certainly took time, and that
conversation, as we know in the Black LGBT community, is very insulated, right? Marriage is not even close to the breadth of conversation that needs to be had.
Exactly.
And often the white LGBT community, because of white supremacy, kind of lasers in on gay marriage as the thing because they kind of almost had everything else already.
Right.
So, Mariah.
Well, I'm gonna get off of President Obama, but
that conversation, as you know, in the Black LGBT community,
what is going on?
Right? Have me on.
Well,
is somebody watching?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So my whole thing is with the whole gay marriage conversation and, how that, white gays and all that. First of all, gay marriage was not liberation. Yeah. Okay. There is so much more to be done before we can even be free. And that goes back to, and that predates Dr. King, right? One thing I want to say around Dr. King and Dr. King's legacy is that, one of my wishes is that people would stop speaking on behalf of Dr. King and just refer back to what he actually said and stop saying Dr. King would have said this, or Dr. King would have supported this, or Dr. King would be so ashamed of this. You don't know that. Just as time goes on, if he were still here, we don't know what he would have evolved on, what his stance would have been. And I think that, a lot of those conversations are deeply rooted in white supremacy in an effort for them to contain the Black community in some way. So we look at the Black Lives Matter movement. All you saw was, lots of white right-wing folks saying what Dr. King would have supported, and this is violent. And I can't say what that would have been. We also have, Dr. King's own children speak on his behalf when they don't really know what Dr. King would have said, what Dr. King would have thought. It's extremely hurtful to think about a man who is responsible for some of my freedoms today in my existence, to think about him and to frame his legacy in a way that would be harmful to me. I can't think about him that way. And my wish is that people would stop putting out these narratives and speaking on his behalf that will make future generations think that, Dr. King wouldn't speak up for them in the same way that he spoke up for other folks. Yes, we know the story of Bayard Rustin. Yes, we know that Bayard Rustin was, kind of like that flame behind all of these impassioned words that Dr. King spoke. But we don't really know what Dr. King said in those moments. We don't know what was done in those moments, and we will never know because Dr. King was stolen from us in an effort to prevent us from being in this very place, in this very moment that we're in. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm done.
No. Like Jim Brown, for example. Like Jim Brown lived long enough for us to see him
become a total clown.
Yeah. Right. But I was watching one night in Miami over the weekend, and I was like, wait, that's the same guy?
Yeah.
I was shook.
I think we all
shook.
We watched him
we watched it too, and it was very like, wow, Jim Brown, damn.
But you know what? I ain't surprised. Like seeing that moment. If that moment actually happened, we know which one we're talking about. If that moment actually happened as it played out in that movie, it wouldn't surprise me that many years later that person became Jim Brown / O.J. Simpson in a different direction. But
let me just give my let me just give my little 2 cents before a little girl goes off and I can't talk.
Gary, then Courtney, please.
Yes, please. So thank you all for the insight, because I definitely agree. I do want to just acknowledge this, I think sometimes we give a little bit too much credit to the United States of America, thinking as if just because you allow a Black man into the office that everything changes. And just because I allowed a Senate seat that everything changes. And all of a sudden, because you finally, got some power, at least, you were given a little bit, you gave a little bit of the bread to me, and I can actually eat a little bit more of your plate. And automatically it changes the systemic injustices that we've seen for years to come. And so what I appreciate about the individuals like Barack Obama, like any other Black senator, like anybody that literally took one for the team, allowed to say, I tried something and I planted a seed. And I think that's the part that we forget. Like, it's a seed that's been planted that's going to go ahead and grow over time. And we may not like the way in which that we've done it, but the fact that a seed has been planted, so give it some time to be able to grow. Prime example, I sit here on the New York City School Board for the largest, school in the entire country. As a Black man sitting on this school board where I'm elected by the mayor to be a part of it, and Courtney, you would understand this as a deputy mayor. Politics is a game of chess. And just because I know I have my intentions on one thing, but the way in which I need to move is another. And so the way that I move today may not show up till 5 years from now. But please please. And that's why I know it's going to happen with Kamala. It's going to be the same with Joe Biden. A lot of things, we're not going to like the way that, you moved today in the wrong way that I think may have messed up some things. But I guarantee you that it's going to go and show up, and it's going to be more to understand, like, I totally believe and agree with all what you guys are saying, but I do not want to negate or stop thinking we need to put all of our eggs in a basket for one person. Barack did what he can, John Lewis did what he can, Martin Luther King did what he can, and some of us, truth be told, don't agree with everything that Martin Luther King actually preached.
Right.
To be very, very clear. But what I can say is that whatever he put a seed in, whatever I could take from it, I took from it. And I think for us as a community, we need to be able to take what you can digest versus thinking that everything is for you and everything is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Same with Malcolm X, everybody else. That's it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really powerful. And as we talk about, the new era of leadership, right? And we kind of got into this a little bit before we got started, but thinking about the leaders of the movement now and what the work that they're doing and how we hold them accountable.
Well, these are the leaders of the movement.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'd love to, Courtney, start with you, as we were just talking about someone who was in office and a leader and an activist. What is some of the ways that we as a community how are we supposed to hold the leaders of the movement accountable for the work that they're doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to answer it in a sort of roundabout way because I have so many things I want to get out. So first, I'm going to say this. I think, I mean, look, you know me. This is the thing. When we talk about sort of, Cirillo made a point earlier about how he talked a bit about the old school Black leaders, right? The old school leadership and how they have to make room for young people. And look, I agree, young people are critically important. It was sort of the point I alluded to early on, which was that Dr. King was very young. There's a reason why a very young man became the face of a piece of the civil rights movement. And we should remember that part, a piece of it, not all of it, right? Because the Black Panther Party existed, Malcolm X existed. There were a whole range of other leaders that we know about and don't know about because our history is not told by us and other people, right? Absolutely. And here's what I think people forget, and this is going to get to your accountability question. You need all of those people. You need all of them because some of us need to be inside. The one thing I say about Kamala Harris all the time is, and I wish she had said on the campaign trail, was that Central Park 5 wouldn't have happened on her watch. It is important that we have Black prosecutors prosecuting crime because we need to make sure they are focused on creating a system of justice and not injustice. Now, we can debate that point, but what I don't think is debatable is that we need diverse people, and in particular, people who look like us in those roles. To Gary's point about, I think it was Gary's point about the judges that were put in place by Barack Obama, for example, right? So one, you need the people willing to be inside who are sympathetic and understand the issues facing community. One. Two, you need the activists on the outside, developing the list, helping to push the policy and pushing elected leadership to the places where they feel the most uncomfortable. Those voices matter. And look, I learned this from one of the best. I learned it from Senator Kennedy. I can remember when Senator Kennedy was alive and I was a young lobbyist and he called.
Wait, tell him which Kennedy.
Senator Ted Kennedy.
Okay, one of my favorite Kennedy right now.
Ted Kennedy.
Yeah, so Senator Kennedy called all the advocates up when ESCA was getting moved through Congress. I will never forget working on that piece of shit legislation. Sorry, can I curse here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, but we're okay.
What was important about it is he called us up to lecture us about not doing enough to push him further to the left. Right? He knew the process. He understood how to move policy from an idea to a law, to a signed law, and then to implementation. But he needed us to push him and his colleagues more. And so what I don't want us to do as we think about how to hold elected officials accountable, and by the way, we got to hold our activists accountable too.
Facts.
As we think about how to hold all these people accountable is to remember that all of them are important pieces of the puzzle. We don't get change without all of those pieces figuring out a way to work together, to apply pressure, to compromise where necessary, but most importantly, to develop ideas. Activists know what are happening. They know exactly what's happening on the streets. And sometimes our elected leadership is a little bit disconnected from that. Cirillo, I agree with you. But the activists got to remind our elected leaders why they took these jobs in the first place. And then also respect their knowledge and know-how about how to move something from an idea to a law.
No, that's very optimistic.
Yeah, I was
body shade with that. He went, that's optimistic. I was expecting a fingernail file.
But here's why. Ernest. I don't want to speak for you, Ernest, because dear God, I wouldn't dare. But here's what I hear in Ernest saying that, and here's what I hear having worked in politics. So, I came out of college, degree in political science from HBCU, and went into working in politics and saw I come from an activist family. My grandparents and great aunt are some of the folks that you're talking about that are a part of the movement. And so I understood further why they decided not to run for office when I saw what the compromises of public office call for. And here's where we are again, right? We're right back to the master's tools. we're right back to the seat at the table, right? And what ends up happening, because we are in, you know, we live under a constitution that had 3/5 in it, that started with 3/5, that has never been rewritten. And if you think about that kind of philosophically as the macrocosm of this conversation and what it means to go into that system and try to do something that would create a reality that would completely overturn it. Because the reality that the activists are talking about would completely overturn the system, right? We're talking about this arc of, the arc of justice is long, right? Mm-hmm. But that's because Dr. King was speaking within a system that he was standing in the living room of a burning house.
Well, I think, yes.
Yeah, but I think
you realize. So
I was going to say, I think what's important that there are also activists within this movement, like Dr. King, who also need to be held accountable for their actions and how they steward their leadership during this movement. Ernest, I'd love to hear you.
Yeah, I just would say that for me as a journalist who I was born in Chicago, I grew up in Houston, Texas. I now live in Philadelphia, who has been in a place that has predominantly Black elected officials that have come up from the community, get elected by the community, and then fuck over the community. Mm-hmm. And it's just, to me, first of all, I have to just say, and I think, Courtney, you might be the exception to the rule, the outlier, but the narrative around this idea that elected officials or, remind them what they came there to do, they don't come there to all do the same things. That's how we got the president of the United States. They're not all there to necessarily come there to do good. So we got to recognize that regardless of their Black, white, Latino, anybody who's going into office don't come in with the same interest to serve. That may be what the job description or what voters expect them to do, but that's not necessarily their intention. A lot of them are coming on there to keep a check. There's a lot of elected officials in my district that have stayed elected in the same damn seat for 40, 30 something years so they can keep pensions, checks, and stay afloat, because Lord knows if they got their ass out of there, they would not be able to get any job anywhere else with the lack of real experience that they don't have. So when I see that people are staying on and keep a check and stay on payroll and do nothing while suppressing the votes in their own communities and then complaining every 4 years why their community voter turnout is not as high, it's very interesting, because you didn't spend 2 years and 4 years suppressing the Black vote in your local races to not get them to get your ass out. So then you turn around 4 years and then try to do otherwise. And so I say all to say that I don't think this idea, this experiment of we need the activists protesting to get the politicians on the outside, that idea is a great theory, right? But in reality, it's not like that. It's very much more messy. It's very much more butchery. And the sad part is we see a lot of Black politicians, or activists actually, that start off really good, doing the right thing, and then get caught up in this politics shit, where then they get into elected office, don't have what it takes to really stand, don't know anything about governance, see all that money, see all that ass, and lose their mind. I can't tell you how many good activists that I have seen in my community start off on the grassroots level and then get elected to a state seat or something and get in trouble with finances, fundraising shit, embezzlement, all kinds of scandals. I have receipts because I am a journalist. I have, in my 5 years on a local level, have seen people on the front line doing some good work. And then somebody tells them, you could do it. You should go up and run for office. And they go out there and then they get exposed and all kinds of stuff happens to them. And so I don't know. I'm just very cynical about this sausage making, where we take community grassroots people and then we churn them through the political system because they get so exploited, and then they come out, either they have to sell out or either they have to make compromises or they end up in scandal. And let me say this, there are some people who've been able to make it and have a balance, but they're so privileged. They have life privilege. They have education experience privilege. They have connections in higher places. There's a difference for everybody. But you taking some of these real rough boys and women who come from the other side and try to put them through that
it doesn't work the same way. And that is an observation I've made from covering Baltimore, Atlanta, South Carolina, St. Louis,
Detroit.
Yeah, but I think to be clear, my point wasn't that we need to take activists and turn them into
that black activist over there in St. Louis who was a big deal and everything. Went to office, and then what happened to him? What happened?
So that actually wasn't my point. My point wasn't that we take activists and turn them into elected officials. My point
I'm not saying that you said that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that. I was just saying that I don't. Okay. I'm just yes, him, Mr. Franks. I think my issue is that it's the notion of the outside working on the inside kind of thing. I think
I'm grappling with this idea of the seat at the table, right? That I'm talking that I raised.
Yeah, it's that wrestling
idea that the intentions and the destiny, the goal. That's why I've often said, no one who would upset the empire will ever get the keys, right? Like, and I think that's what Ernest is talking about, this idea that we have in the community around seat at the table and what the outcomes of having the seat at the table are in what we intend and what the actual possibilities are based on the system that people are working in. Courtney, I'm gonna let you go. I think Marcus and then Gary.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've all read bell hooks, okay? You can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. The challenge is, the challenge is, those are the tools that we have right now. And so I think this isn't a dichotomy here. This is not either or. In my view, it's both and. Today, I have a system of tools that I can deploy to make legal, like policy change. I have a system of tools that I can deploy through the court system to try to create additional justice. Some of what that rests on is whether who is sitting at the table to determine it and whether they agree with what my sense of justice is. And so my goal, as I think about it, my dad played football, I was an athlete. I want my team in there making those decisions. Because I know that if you think as I think, you believe in justice. And so it'd be beautiful to blow up the whole system. That's just not going to happen today. Now, it may happen over time, but in the meantime, while we're getting to the blow it up, we got to fix what we have. I have never seen a world where we can someone said to me the other day in a Clubhouse chat, I don't want a seat at the table. I want to blow the whole MF table up. Well, okay, then what? Where you going to sit? How you going to change things? What are you going to do? And do you have a plan for what it looks like after you blow the whole thing up? And I would say this to this person, and I would say to some in the activist community, they don't actually have a plan.
I'm Marcus and then Gary, and then Mariah, I think, and Marcus.
Yeah, I think as this all centers around this conversation about accountability, something that Mariah said really resonated for me, which is that you can't put words in people's mouths. You can't assume what they think or what they want, especially if they did, but definitely if they're an elected official whose job it is to get out front and say something and then stand by that word. So people need to be able to speak about what their expectations are, about what their standards are, particularly elected officials. They need to be able to say what communities they're coming from. This is something that Ella Baker said. She would meet people and ask them, who are your people? Right? Where are you coming from and where are you going? And I think that in the spirit of compromise, we have allowed certain people to pretend they're on our team and they're just not. I think that in that process, this is how we get, as Ernest said earlier, this is how we get people whose politics are defunct, who are bereft. The book that I'm writing right now that will be out this year is talking about how the system itself is convincing us that we don't have tools, that we don't have options, that we don't have choices, that we can't say this isn't good enough, that somehow we need to know how to build a table to know that another table sitting on my neck isn't good enough. And I don't think we need that. And I think that's a big part of the reason why young people have been doing a lot of great work, because they're not so hung up on how much they do or don't know. They say, this is bad, right? The system that we have, the big point is that, and this is something that the King talked about, was the fierce urgency of now. How long can we wait? Because climate change is coming. COVID is already here. We're already dead. We've already been lost.
Yep.
Right? And those of us who remain are fortunate, if for as long as we stay. But what we do and what choices we make in that process really matter. So I would say all that to say, when we talk about accountability is an aspiration. It's something that you want. And in order to do that, you need to be connected to people who you want to help you grow, to help you learn, to keep you in line and keep you in check. And if you do not go out and do that, whether you are an elected official or you are a leader of a social movement, you will come up short. It's not about being perfect. It's about, what does it look like when I mess up? Am I transparent? And then I can be accountable. So that's what I would say to all that.
You know what, Marcus, you hit it right on the nose in terms of what we're seeing right now. Like, I think all of us that are of a certain generation where we've been in this battle, where we all know Martin Luther King, we all know Malcolm X, we know Sully Carmichael, all, because that's what we were taught. The younger individuals right now don't know it in the same way that we do. But what I love that you said earlier is that, you know what, they're very much like, you know what, they realize like something is wrong. And the young people are literally going in the streets right now and saying, you know what, I don't care about that. You know, the past is the past. It's valid. It's important. But let me tell you what's wrong today. And I'm not going to take it. And I don't care if you're a bureaucrat. I don't care if you're the president. I don't care if you hold a seat at the table, anything else. But if it is an injustice situation for me today, I'm going to speak on it. I feel as if the young folks right now are speaking more to it in a space of authenticity than we have years ago, because they're also calling out the folks that you talked about earlier that, yeah, I don't need everybody to be my friend at the end of the day. It is okay. You know what I mean? Like, if, you know, and I don't need everybody else that, you know, oh, you're an ally and everything else. I don't need allies. Like, either you're with me or you're not, in that same respect. And the young folks right now are literally calling out. And that's why, you know, I'm happy about the work that I do, because I'm literally listening to them. They're teaching me every day.
I want to say something about that real quick. I'm 29, and, you know, I have these conversations with my parents and other folks. And I say this, the reason why there is this rebelliousness is because I'm in the journalism industry, right? I'm in media. I saw so many of my elders, people that's on up with my parents and whatnot, that, you know, told me and taught me in journalism in earlier years when I was at Penn and these schools, oh, this is how you have to do it. You got to be traditional. You got to work your way to, you know, work at a newsroom, get your salary, get your benefits, and this is the route to go, right? But I saw them get laid off. I saw them don't get those promotions. I saw them not get those raises they deserved. I saw them not get that leg up. And I saw them do all of the things that they were taught to do and play that game, only for them to get fucked over in the end. And I said to myself, if that was what I'm supposed to do, you say leading by example, I can't blame you, but I blame the system. I can't keep putting my work in the same system that didn't work for you in the way that you did it. Something has to change. I don't know all of the tools, but I know that how it's working for me, it can't work for you. If it's not work for you, it's not going to work for me. And I've seen so many of my parents and folks who did that way, tried that way, did those things, said this, said that, told their kids, if you wear your shirt tucked in, if you get a degree, if you do this way, it's going to turn out this way. You got to do this. And we still was getting fucked over. And so I got to a point where I had to say, you know what, whether I have an Ivy League degree or whether I am openly gay and queer in my profession, they're going to do what they're going to do, but I have to work and live my truth and live my best life as possible and really speak up for the way I can. And it may not be prim and proper. It may not be in cursive. It may not be in all of the ways that it used to be, but I would rather live knowing that I did what was necessary in the time I lived than try to do it in this very strategic way, because I've seen strategy get chewed up and spit down. You can't do strategy with white people. I'm sorry. With these people, then you can say this, right? And you might get a couple of good white folks that might be nice and do some good things, but there's a lot of evil white people, and I think we ignore that. But white supremacy is still alive and well, and white supremacy is not just the people outside of the Capitol. They're in our nonprofits, they're in our healthcare systems, they're in our courthouses, they're in our journalism newsrooms, and they are literally actively going to come for us. And so what do you do? How do you protect your kids? How do you protect those people when they're in those rooms with those domestic terrorists? Because you're so good at fighting the evil when it's blatant, but we ain't never been taught how to protect ourselves and do this in here. And that's why I'm at a place now where I am trying to build people up, to teach people how to self-protect themselves. I have Black trans women friends that I'm really friends with. I tell them, you don't have to play respectability politics, because guess what? I'm gay. They treat me like shit too. They treat us all the same, essentially, when they come at us with that hate. So we have to get to a place, well, not exactly, I'm not mean like that, but I'm saying the hate is real across, but everyone experiences in different ways and different nuances. Let me clarify. But I'm saying that they don't care. We try so hard to be in this hierarchy of, well, I have this degree, or I'm from this location, or I have this accomplishment. But when you see the people who have died in our community, and this is a media issue I hate, is that we always treat it as if it's poverty, or these people were displaced, or that it's only it's across the board where this is happening. And so what I'm trying to say is that the answer is not trying to make us be more permeable and desirable by the same people that will chew us up and spit us out. Why am I being respectable to white people when they are the people that take and give allegedly at the same time?
Oh, that's a word.
If I could,
give me 1 second, Cirillo. Gary had to depart. He is, we're talking about we're talking about the future and posterity, and Gary is taking care of a baby. Before you jump in, Cirillo, I think Mariah was waiting to say something. I want to give her a chance to jump in before you, and then you go ahead.
Yeah, this is a very heavy conversation, but I was just hearing what you all were talking about with the tools and like respectability politics, and and it leads me back to like what owning your power looks like, right? And so like, even when I think about the many, many ways in which our people are oppressed, and the ways in which I've had to navigate this world to provide for myself, to get the things that I need, and really what I've had to leverage to survive. I think about how white supremacy played a part in that, but I also think about how my own Black community played a part in that, right? In my regression. And so, one of the things, and I'm going to go back to the work that I'm doing, is that nobody was showing up for Black trans community. Nobody was hearing the concern. They weren't reading about the deaths. They weren't hearing the cries. Even in the heat of the summer when George Floyd was happening, you also had Tony McDade happening, but you also had other women dying miles away, and they weren't being heard or talked about. And one of the things that really struck me, and I knew that it's time for me to step into my power, and I have the tools to really create a resource, but a safe resource where I don't have to ask anyone for anything. I don't have to be respectable. I don't have to explain anything to you. And so I leveraged every relationship I had, and I had comrades, not allies, not accomplices. I had comrades who really went in the trenches with me and helped me get this money, helped me build this capital, helped me to get, this exposure. They leveraged their degrees, their jobs, their offices. They leveraged everything to help me. And that's what I define as a comrade, willing to give up or sacrifice everything that you have because you truly believe in community. And, a lot of these people weren't Black or brown people. Some of these people were the good white folks who felt guilty. But, I go back to, some of the root of this problem is our own. some of the root of this problem is our own. You know, we got so many hoteps walking around here like, oh yeah, I'm woke and it's going on and da 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 da. But they're causing to, you know, to community. And so, you know, and I can't stay on too much longer either because I have another project. But what I want to say is this, and this is what I wrote to you, Blair. Yeah. If your activism is not intersectional, it's trash.
I said that. Trash. Yes.
If your messaging is not intersectional, it's trash. If you get on a mic and you say Black Lives Matter, but you turn around and you don't speak out, if you see a Black trans woman getting knocked across her head or being spoken about in a way that's degrading and dehumanizing, you're trash.
Come on.
You're not living up to any type of legacy or building one that will even be used in the future, because this is not what the future looks like.
Yes.
And so, you know, I love Black people. I love my Black people. And, you know, Blackness is the way. It will always be the way. We are the guiding light to save the entire world. But we can't get there unless we include all of us, the most marginalized of us, the ones who don't have a seat at the table, who don't have an active voice in this fight. And so that's what I have to say about today and what today means to me.
Mariah, because I know you have to go, tell everybody how they can support the work that you're doing, so that we can continue to
build community
actively.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can support House of Tulip by visiting houseoftulip.org. But even if you don't support House of Tulip, just go out in your local community and support somebody. Support somebody, support something. You know, don't just sit here and watch it and be like, oh, that's sad. Oh, I don't agree with it.
Or just share my article and stop.
Right, right. But more importantly, if you believe in getting free, if you want to be free, every time you come into contact, and this is not for white folks, because I don't care about white folks. This is for our Black people. Every time you come into contact with one of our Black folks and they have this mind frame or this opinion that would set us back so far, talk to them. Let them know what's up. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have an opportunity every day to change hearts and minds. I change hearts and minds by my pure existence.
Well, this is speaking truth to power, right? Speaking truth to privilege is also speaking truth to power.
Yes.
Cirillo, brother. Yes, Cirillo.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add some. I feel like we talk about this whole like the economics question, because I think it's a big one. Like, and why economics is so important. Like, I seen it, and I'm gonna tell you, and I don't want to spray the organization and what I used to do and all that like that. But I remember once upon a time where I knew, right? Gary was talking about when you know something is wrong, right? And I came into politics in, I guess, more of a, purist manner, right? Where I felt like, hey, we're on the same side of V, we doing the good work. That means that we're gonna be moving in the same car, in the same direction, using the same gas, with the same whatever on, right? Like we doing it. And then, like, you get kicked in your ass and you realize, you know, I put myself out there, I tell you my truth, and all of a sudden, boom, right? I'm damn near like, people say in like digital space, shadow banned, right? But I'm like physically shadow banned by white folk who claim to be progressives. But when you say, hey, look, I want you to earmark this budget for my people. I want you to do this for my people. I want to make sure that you talk about economic justice agenda. You're talking about a progressive agenda and what that looks like, racial economic justice. But yet, like when we say, hey, make a third of the budget be for this, then you really start to, I'm telling you right now, anybody out there doing activism work, start talking about a budget. You hit on the budget, you will expose all racism and all you need to know about everybody. I don't care white, black, blue, purple, green.
They say appropriations determine priorities. Appropriations are priorities.
Where the money resides.
Where the money resides.
Where the money resides.
And that's what, and I agree with that. Yeah.
And I don't want to make this about like it's solely about money, right? But if we're talking about tools, right? That is a physical tool. Or however you thinking about it now, because you know money digitized and then people ain't even talking about money like that. But we're talking about resources, right? and time and money and physical space and wow, it's like, yo, like all these things kind of touch one another, and it's hard to really like talk about how we move and how we gain more space and become a bit more freer and breathe a little bit easier if we don't actually have resources to actually have clean air in our communities, right? Talk about free education in our communities. If our little babies have the right meals they need to eat when they're in school, these little things. Talking about, we're not talking about, yo, give me the biggest house in the Hamptons, I want a Lamborghini. We are talking about bare necessities, right? Literally, like we're talking about human rights, and that's why sometimes I get so upset. And I'm like, we still talking about civil rights. We still talking about Black Lives Mattering. We can't even we look in 1965, 64. We talking about civil rights. 2021, we still talking about Black Lives Matter. That's like a step below. Like you got like mattering, and then you got like civil rights, and then you got like human rights. And like at some point though, on a human rights level, and every leader we had, as soon as they was when they were put down, you looked at MLK, looked at Malcolm X, even Jane, Louis, come on, y'all, help me out here.
Patrice Lumumba.
Huh?
Patrice Lumumba?
No, man. Hamer.
Yeah,
yeah. I'm sorry. But we talk about the.
I thought you talking about people who got killed.
No, but when you talk about not just folks that got killed, but leaders in our community, folks that stepped up and started talking about economics, right? Yeah. As soon as like literally you saw their rise on like in the community, or their rise in politics, their rise in their agenda be shut down by like suppressive tactics by white supremacy, right? And they start to siphon off the resources, cherry pick the people that are more palatable to white sensibilities. And so honestly, like the more we can get people, and I talked about this in the chat, the more we can normalize what it means to be free and to breathe a bit more easier on a resource level. I think that we can get some of these big top ticket agendas like items like for Black communities taken care of, but it's not until there has to be a wraparound approach to the writers like Ernest, the activists like folks like me and others in the streets. We're talking about the politicians. There has to be a collective effort of accountability, but also a shared agenda and a vision for what that looks like. You can't just be walking around and talking about like this, like mystifying what that looks like. There has to be hard, concrete things we can move on. And the agenda can't be 100 items. Like we got to figure out like what is structural and what things that can move the needle in a real way. And then on local and state level, they can be more progressive moves. But on this federal level, because a lot of times that's a sexy thing to be a part of. Like that shit, it's incremental. Because to Courtney's point, like it's a lot of like complicated and complex things that happen on that level that a lot of people just aren't privy to. And so, like I would say that, and to end it, is y'all, politics is local. You want real change. When people say this all the time, get involved in your local politics, get engaged on a local level and state level. Because when you talk about what's happening to you on an immediate level, your budgets are coming from the mayor and city councils. That's so when you talk about, hey, look, why is my life not changing? It's because you got leaders that you put in office, or you didn't get out and vote, happen to be there, making decisions on your life.
Right. I would say with the accountability portion is just like, because we were talking about that, and I think we end up talking about these things, but like one of the things I'm hearing from you, and I've been thinking about just in general, is that we as Black people have to be a little bit more stringent on our litmus test of entry. So if everybody wants to work with, the people want to work with white people, they say these good white people, what's the standard? What's the litmus test to letting people be in these conversations? Because I feel like we're letting too many people into the house. We're giving too many cookouts, and even people that are not, just all of these different people, we're just letting in if they put a hashtag up or a statement or something. But I want to see the money, right? Like, okay, if you're a white elected official that's coming in here having a conversation about how you want endorsements and you want photo shoots, where in your budget item line list are you allocating things for Black communities? To say to be transactional with Black people at this day and time is to perpetuate white supremacy. So politicians that do this, you do this for me, then I'm doing this for you, and you know where we're at, and you're talking about fixing equity, that to me shows you that your heart is not in the right place, your values are not in the right place, and you're not going to mean well. And I have seen in so many times covering politics where I've seen Black elected officials see these white politicians come into their neighborhoods, come into their districts, and they do all this promising or they do all this talk. And I say, well, me being the critical person I am, like, well, what's that about? Because what they got for you? Well, we're going to see. Well, why are you moving with them and you don't know yet? Why are we doing the we'll see? Because that's what we do. We do the we'll see. But why are we doing all this work? Why are we giving them a vouch? Because they're using our proximity to Blackness in this day and age is going to do more for them than to do for us if we don't get something on the table. So if you're going to be strategic, if you want to have them conversations with them type of people, get something, goddamn it, because it's too many people who want to be. In my nonprofit that I'm a part of, there was this white organization that really had some issues with diversity and inclusion, really wanted to be, being in line with Black folks, talking about let's do a joint statement. I don't need to do no joint statement. My people know where I stand. But you got resources. You got the coins. So let's do a partnership, a sponsorship. What you got? They cut out that check. We discussed what it was going to be. I said, okay, they're good people. We got $50,000 for this organization. Guess they mean what they say because they put their money where their fucking mouth is. I need that. So if you're going to do that, have something. What I'm sick of is photo shoots, empty platitudes, pictures, promises, negotiations. White people, come forward with what you're going to do. Because I think that was the issue I had with Biden before some people got in his ass. Still got issues with Biden, but he come in. Y'all know I'm good to y'all. I'm sorry. It's 2021. What have you done for me lately? Please don't give me a history lesson on what you've done. What have you have on the table? What are things you're going to specifically do for Black people? Don't give me all this of color shit, because we know what that means. When people do the of color, Black folks are always pushed to the side. Blackness is always pushed out of the other of color conversation. It always is. And so to me, it's about the litmus test about who you letting in. But then in community, because I really appreciate Mariah saying sometimes it be us, where are we holding accountable to the activists in our community that want to say they represent? What are they doing? How are they representing? What are they saying? And why are we just letting them get by? It's always this narrative of, oh, if we have this person, they Black, I can't hold them accountable. I can't, we got to, no. If you're going to fuck up the bag, then you need to be had. If you're going to fuck up the bag, you're going to be had. So, if you're going to be out here saying all kind of crazy stuff that's going to create problems and friction in the community, I am going to have a conversation with you. We need to. And I feel like activists that are so quick to get white people together, we have to keep that same energy in our community, because we have people that are our skin folk, but not our kin folk. And we got to be real about that.
I agree with that. But one thing I think we need to be really thoughtful about, to your point about resources and to Cirillo's point about resources, we often sell ourselves so cheap, right?
Yeah.
For minimal dollars to put our name on a statement or to walk, to do whatever. And so this is why my life's work has been about government. And I believe Dr. King knew this. The running a city, a state, the country, right, is really about who controls the resources and how those resources are utilized to change communities, whatever the community, corporate community, low-income community, not usually low-income community, because we actually haven't seen a substantial amount of change there, right? And so to me, if I can become one of the people, or I can help elect people who can make decisions that are like the decisions that I would make, we will all be better for it. Now, do I always agree with AOC's politics or Ayanna Pressley's politics? No, I don't. I love them. I agree with a lot of the things that they say, but I'm not always completely aligned with them. I would not actually call myself a progressive. I'm maybe a pragmatic progressive, maybe, right? But what do I care about? The liberation of Black people. That's what I care about. End of story. I care about other things too, right? But everything comes back to whether Black people are able to access the economic justice they need, whether we're able to access the racial justice we need, and whether we're able to walk around this country to be US-centric freely, right? That's what this is about for me. So the only amendment I would make to Mariah's statement about activists who are trash is that if respectability politics, if pulling up your pants, if you think that's required for me to be able to have my freedom and my justice, well, you're trash too, right? My point is, part of what we have to do is learn the rules of government, what it takes to move policy, what it takes to move money, and make sure the decision makers that represent us are actually doing that. But it also means that the activists in particular have to understand the process and how it works and really understand what the right things to be asking for are.
I would like to see a situation where some of these elected officials too, who are there, what are they doing to change policies to alleviate some of these burdens for activists and community to engage? I really have wrote critically in Philadelphia about some of the minutia that is systemically put there to keep and suppress people from voting, from participating, and from other things. It's hard to teach people how to learn things that was made to purposely suppress them. Applications and forms written in certain types of jargon and languages in print. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. And so sometimes I want elected officials that are on the same team, right? To not just only say to us, here are these resources, here are these applications, just apply, but also do things to make them accessible to the community, make them make sense to the community. I think part of the job isn't just to give, but to explain and to give. Because people, if you know your people, you know the boundaries. With these grants during COVID-19, there was so many people who did not get that money. Not because they weren't good enough or weren't qualified, but because there were people out here who did not have the financial literacy or understood how to apply or do that stuff. And we didn't see a lot of our elected officials really being active or aggressive in doing that. And so I just feel like part of it is giving the information and doing that work as well.
Okay, so we Cirillo had to go. Thank you, Cirillo. I know Courtney has to go. We want to say happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
To Maxwell.
To Max.
Mwah. We love him.
Thank you, Courtney, for joining us. We are going to
give the
last two words to the last two standing brothers here with us. And thank you all. I want to just say this to everybody who participated tonight, who watched tonight. Just thank you so much for this conversation, for the work that you're all doing.
It's going to uplift so many people, we're sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely sure. So, Marcus, please, what you want to see from our elected officials, from our community,
from each other?
Give us a good call to action, brother.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me, for putting me in conversation with all these wonderful people. Now that it's just us, Ernest, thank you for everything you said. You've allowed me to stay very quiet, and I appreciate that, because I agree with so much of what you said. But in terms of a call to action, so a lot of things have been said lately, a lot of ideas, a lot of things that I think we need to ground ourselves in, equity being one, justice being another, love being another. One of the things I didn't hear too much about was solidarity. And we talked around it, right? But we didn't talk about what does it mean to establish solidarity in a community. And to my knowledge, to my understanding, you need to have some type of basic principles that you organize around, which I think should be equity, taking the people who need the most and giving them the most, which means not equality, like the fake version of Dr. King that we get, but equity, which is where a lot of our intersectional radical Black feminists are pushing us. So we need solidarity. And we need equity, and we need that to be the foundation of our community growth. You cannot have solidarity with somebody who you do not know. You can love Black people and not know us. You can love some Black people and not know all of us. And I'm not saying everybody has to be everything to everybody, but we do need to establish ourselves in the communities that we have. We can do more for each other. And running the rat race and pretending, one of the things that did upset me a little bit is pretending that the system isn't built to be misunderstood. It is built that way deliberately. So the idea that we somehow need to learn the language of a system built by lawyers predominantly, who are intending to maintain that space for their own kind, is misguided. And it's something that if we're not open enough to accepting that our standards need to change, even if and when we should be strategic, then we are not in community. We're not having the same conversation, and we are not people.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the things that I think, I want to say this before I give another word, is that I think what is extraordinary as someone who kind of conceptualized this conversation and watching it happen is that so much of the conversation, goes back to this idea of whether or not we can use the master's tools or not. I mean, I think that we that is one of the themes that was layered into and kind of was at the foundation of a lot of this conversation, because we are going to continue to run into
the society that we
live in, and how we can't unwrite what has been written. We can't unring the bells of history. And
can I say one more small thing?
Of course.
Just sorry, Ernest, but and that whole point about the master's tools reminded me about Bell Hooks and what she was saying about power, which is that we live in a society that privileges certain types of power. And those types of power, as Dr. King correctly identified, capitalism, racism, and militarism. Those tools will not liberate oppressed people anywhere, ever. They never have, they never will. And so as we talk about dismantling oppression, as we talk about liberation, as we talk about justice, we need to be able to have a clear-minded conversation about capitalism that does not put us further into a hole where we begin to address one another and ourselves as property.
Woo!
Well,
Ernest,
it's so true. It's true. Like Jenny, it's true though. I think the other part that I thought was interesting in this conversation, I thought we were going to do, but we didn't, which was interesting, was the ability and audacity to dare to imagine, which is a lot what King talked about and talking about having a dream. We don't have dreams. We don't imagine. People don't dare to imagine anymore out loud. And I think that millennials and activists are trying to do that. And our dreams are being disrupted by our previous generations, right? Mm-hmm. Like Dr. King spoke a dream that people thought was a joke back then. It was like, oh, that ain't gonna happen. Oh, that's a joke. Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, child, that ain't happening. They laughed at it. They really was feeling it, but they laughed. Mm-hmm. And here we are in 2021 with a new generation daring to imagine a world of what would it look like if police power did not dictate us. What would it look like if we lived in a society where Black people were supporting each other in ways that was uplifting and we leaned on each other? We're doing this. What does it look like to have an intersectional society where Black queer people are included and feel at home? And we were addressing the health inequities along with that, right? What does it look like to explore different ways to express our genders and sexualities while also our spirituality, right? All of those imaginations we're having. And I think what has happened is that the previous generation got some of those rights that they wanted so bad. And because they failed to imagine, they replicated whiteness. They missed the idea. The idea wasn't to be white people. When Dr. King had that dream was about Black people being Black, doing those things, not Black people living like white people. That was not the dream. The conversation wasn't equality. It was equity. It was something bigger. It was called liberation. Yeah. And they didn't dream liberation. They dreamed equality. So dreaming equality meant having the fence with the white people, living like the Joneses, but still miserable, and not realizing that if you live in equality with white people, they're going to be 9 miles ahead and we're going to be behind. Yeah. And so they live that life and they don't know. They don't have the imagination. When I heard some of the people in the conversation say things about tools and what these things, you're not imagining. You're not thinking. You're not engaging with people who are doing that work. I want people to walk away from this conversation tonight and realize that just because you don't see it, don't mean it doesn't exist. Just because you didn't think it doesn't mean it's not out there. There are pathways to liberation. There are tools, other tools, imaginary tools, what I would call devices that we have at our disposal to do this. The problem is that some people do not want to admit that they have benefited in the complicity of this shit. And so it's hard for them to imagine because their whole dependency coexists in the complicity, which makes it hard for them to move forward. So when you are somebody that benefits off of the law and these political players and this money and this capitalism, it's hard for you to then be the person where you're seeing your people, right? Your people in your community say to you, fuck capitalism, fuck Wall Street, fuck this hierarchy, fuck this 1% status, fuck Beyonce and Jay-Z's billionaire status. I don't want that shit. I don't want to be like them. I don't want that. That's not success to me. You're like, wait a minute, they're gonna come for me next. And nobody wants to tell the truth, but yes, we're coming for you too. We're coming for anybody who's going to keep these oppressive systems alive. That means black cops that want to beat us and kill us. That means black billionaires who don't want to diverge that equity and put it back in the. We're coming for all of them because capitalism, racism, and all the other isms, militarisms, they don't see race, and we shouldn't see it either. They don't see us, we shouldn't see them. People out here celebrating that black cop out there during the and I'm going to say this, I have to say it because it's on my mind. They celebrating this cop, this black cop and it's a metaphor for what was said earlier. And I think it's the perfect metaphor that sums all this shit up. And I think it's the mic drop, is that they celebrated that black cop who went down there and stopped the sin. Everybody's like, he's a hero. But what they didn't fail to mention was that he was a cop. And he was a cop in the same building where other cops left him fucking hanging. And also let those motherfuckers come in and leave him for dead. And in that moment, he wasn't a cop. He was a man trying to save his life. But guess what? That's exactly the metaphor and allegory for all these elected officials that are black that try to come in there and change the table. They'll let you in, but they'll let the wolves come and get you. And you better hope on your blackness that you can save yourself from it. But you get no hero award for playing the game because you played the game to get in, but you're not going to play the game to get out.
Well,
that's a whole word, y'all.
We as we are engaging, this is the first time that we have moderated a conversation like this on Facebook and public, and so the time got away from us. We were planning to have a conversation about what this generation's dream would be. But as we started.
We black people, we talk a lot.
We talk a lot. It's a whole bunch of us, and I've definitely learned a lot about making sure that we can't invite 19 people to the party next time. I want to thank you both. I want to also thank all of our panelists, those who had to go, Mariah and Courtney and Gary and Cirillo,
and Toya, our
technical director, who is behind the scenes,
and Ernest and
Marcus for your wisdom and insight and your audacity. We called this Truth to Power because I truly believe that the only way that we can get to a place of a conversation about liberation is that we have truth as our foundation. In all places, Frederick Douglass said, truth is beautiful in all places at all times. And, we've got to get to a place where we
believe and understand and know all the right truths and the same truths and are all aligned.
And know that the truth is more important than our feelings or our pockets or our security, right? Because the truth, if that is the thing to lead us to liberation, then that is the most important thing. That is.
So if I can just leave everybody with a call to action tonight, it would be, well, I'll let Marcus go ahead.
Well, let our guests give their final calls to action, and then we'll.
I think Marcus did you? He did.
Right, he did.
Right. Ernest, you gave your
solidarity. I was talking about solidarity.
Yeah. And dare to imagine.
And dare to imagine. Yeah.
Well,
mine, y'all stay openly black. That's it. That's it. Just love your blackness. Yeah. Celebrate it as much as you can. Like, be black, y'all.
And recognize, I would say, recognize that this lot that there's an element of personal sacrifice to liberation, and to collective liberation, to collective solidarity.
Pressure makes diamonds.
Pressure makes diamonds. And so
but also I want to say this to your point. You say it is a personal sacrifice, but it's a personal sacrifice for cooning too.
Yes.
Like there's both personal sacrifices. We always say no shade, but like, oh, there's a personal sacrifice for being your authentic self. But there's a personal sacrifice for suppressing yourself, being in the closet, being amongst white people. That shit ain't cute.
No.
Start doing
going through it. That ain't cute.
No.
Start doing the right thing and see how hard it actually is. That's what I want to tell people. You want to tell me how hard it is to have to sacrifice and to put on your double consciousness and code switch and all that. And I get it. Like, I am black. Like, I know what that struggle is. Start doing good things for people and see how hard that is. It ain't no easy stroll.
Yes.
It's work. And people will come in and tell you to stop doing it.
In a heartbeat.
Thank you both and all
everybody
so much for your brilliance, for your boldness, for your time, your energy, your love for Black people, your love for liberation. We are grateful for it. We are grateful to have you leading the community.
Absolutely.
And in the spaces that you are, to help all of us lift and rise and imagine.
We love you all. Thank
y'all.
You so much.
Everybody. We'll be back with season 2 of the Savage Chat series
very soon.
We'll announce when soon.
Everybody continue to support.
We love y'all so much.
Our Black people. We love y'all.
We love y'all.
Have a great night, everybody. Peace and blessings.
See you.